Blessings in Jesus, dear friends. Once again, thank you for joining us here on Moriel TV and on RTN. My name is James Jacob Prasch. We're just wanting to do a update and a follow-up to the video that we did, given the present situation transpiring in Israel as we speak. I awoke to very bad news today here in the United States, where I am at the moment. Message from Israel that the first Jewish believer, Messianic Jew in a combat brigade, the Golani Brigade, was killed yesterday in combat near Gaza, fighting to liberate one of the villages that were taken over by Hamas terrorists. His name is David Ratner in English. His father is a pastor of a Messianic fellowship near Ashdod. Now, Israel team know the fellowship. I do not know this particular soldier. We, of course, know people who do know him, but his congregation is known and his father is known. He's a pastor. Again, as I pointed out, many or most of the young Jewish believers who are in the army after high school, before going to university and so forth, talking guys 17, 18, 19, 20. David, who was killed yesterday, had just turned 20. Most believers volunteer for combat brigades because they think it is important to their testimony. What we call Kravi, he was a fighter. And Golani was a frontline combat brigade, and he was tragically killed yesterday. Knowing Yeshua, you be with the Lord, but it's still a loss for his family and for the congregation. And it's very sad. It's very sad. I had my own son there during wars when he was in the army. It's not an easy situation for any parent, but you dread the news that something happened to your son, and it did happen to a son of a pastor in Israel yesterday. This situation is not good. I'd like to begin, please, by reading two passages of Scripture, both familiar to us. One is, of course, Genesis chapter 12. What I'm looking at is Iran, Hamas, and Joebama, the trio of Satan. Iran, Hamas, and Joebama, which is, of course, a compendium of Joe Biden and Barack Obama. Mr. Biden following the policies of Obama. Iran, Hamas, and Joebama, the trio of Satan and the judgment of God. In Genesis chapter 12, God's promise to Abraham that is reiterated later through Isaac and Jacob. I'll bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. No exception, the ancient empires of the ancient world who persecuted the Jews, be it the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Assyrians. They're all gone. They're all gone. Throughout history, we saw the same thing. Even in modern history. The Soviet Union would not allow the Jews to immigrate to Israel. They were refuseniks, and they supported Gamal Abdel Nasser in Syria to try to destroy Israel in 1973, and before that in 1967, and so forth. Well, we know what happened to the Soviet Union. Genesis 12:3, God's judgment came on the Soviet Union because of their persecution of the true church and their persecution of the Jews. Abraham's children by faith, by birth, and by second birth. Abraham's children by birth and Abraham's children by second birth. The German Nazis built a wall around the Jewish ghettos of Warsaw and other cities. And any Jew climbing over that wall was machine gunned. And so a wall was built around the capital of the Reich, Berlin. And any German climbing over that wall was machine gunned. Not until Hermann Hesse, the last of the Nazis responsible for the Holocaust and the Blitz, was dead in Spandau prison in Berlin did one brick of that wall come down, only maybe 2 weeks later, when the last Nazi responsible for the Holocaust was dead. The wall came down almost immediately. I mean, within a matter of weeks. We go back further. Spain had been the superpower. They called it the Spanish Main. Most of what is today Latin America and a lot of other places were in the pocket of Spain. But then came the Inquisition. Almost immediately, Francis Drake sunk the Armada. And Britannia ruled the waves. Britain became the superpower. After that, it became different again. Britain revoked the Bellflower Declaration. They literally let Jews burn rather than come to Israel after promising them the land under Lord Bellflower. They revoked what they promised. Well, Jews burned. And then even after the war was over and they saw what happened in the concentration camps, the British put Jews into camps in Cyprus to stop them from coming to the land the British had promised them and that God said it was theirs. Well, Jews burned. So did Coventry and London. And the British Empire very quickly went into collapse following the situation, what they did. The Suez Crisis happened, and then everything went down the tubes. Britain was finished as a world power. It only remained a significant player on the global stage because it was the junior partner of the United States in the special relationship. We know that the Persians in the ancient world were benevolent to Jews, but were told would turn against them one day. And Daniel 10, and that is, of course, happening now. Rome, of course, came under God's judgment, but not immediately. The judgment on Rome is delayed. On the Roman Empire, it will be reconfederated according to Daniel chapter 2. The Antichrist will come through it. He will persecute the church. He will persecute the Jews, betray them, breaking the covenant he makes with them, setting up the abomination of desolations. And as we can be sure, a reconfederated Roman Empire will come under God's judgment. It's already in a situation, as we've already pointed out, where the iron is not adhering to the clay. I will bless them that bless thee and curse them that curse thee. We also have a recorded teaching that I'll just refer to briefly from the book of Obadiah. Obadiah, 1 chapter, verse 15. It speaks not of Obadiah's day too much. It speaks about the day of the Lord at the close of the age. For the day of the Lord draws near on all the nations. As you've done, it will be done to you. Your dealings will return on your own head. What happened with the Edomites that Obadiah is prophesying against is during the Babylonian captivity. When the Babylonians destroyed Israel, the Edomites took the side of the Babylonians against their Jewish cousins, their brothers, as God calls them. The descendants of Esau teamed up with the Babylonians against Judah, the southern kingdom, and perpetrated unspeakable crimes of genocide against them, for which they came under God's judgment. As you have done, it will be done to you. And I've seen this repeatedly. Left-wing socialist European governments, one after another, condemning Israel for its reacting to radical Islamic terror, calling it disproportionate. And I saw the bombings that took place in Brussels and in London and in Germany and in Paris. All of these European countries and governments that condemn the Jews for standing up to radical Islam fell victim to radical Islam themselves. We know this. But it's ongoing. Imagine someone comes into their house, opens the door, and they come in through the kitchen door, and something's happened. There's a blockage in the kitchen sink, or one of the kitchen sinks, and the faucet is running, and the sink is spilling over, and there's water all over the floor going everywhere, and it's going into other rooms, saturating the carpets, and possibility of wet damage to the hardwood floors, and it is causing electrical damage and the risk of electrical fire because it's rising so much. There's so much water coming. And you call to a neighbor, a friend, and this elderly person or this handicapped person who can't manage it all by themselves too well calls for a neighbor, friend, and the friend comes in and says, "This is terrible. Just a minute, I'll be right back with some sponges. And I'll help you mop up the floor." It is illogical. It is stupid to grab some sponges or to try to mop up the floor or to squeegee out the water until you turn off the faucet and unplug the sink. Had the faucet not been running and the sink not been obstructed, it wouldn't have happened. It is a direct result of the clogged sink and the running faucet. The most logical thing you would do is turn off the faucet, close the spigot, unplug the sink. Then get the mops. Then grab some sponges. Then try to contain the damage. It would be idiotic to grab sponges and a mop when the sink is still spilling over and the spigot is still running and the drain is still clogged up or blocked. Well, that is what we witnessed today when President Joebama gave his speech. Notice he did not mention Iran. He did not mention what was causing the problem. He did not mention closing the spigot, turning off the faucet. He just said, "This is terrible. It's an outrage. We're going to stand by you and get some sponges." The $6 billion via the United States, originating in Korea, presently in a bank to be claimed by Iran in Qatar, where Hamas has its headquarters. Its headquarters is not in Gaza. It is in Qatar. Did he refreeze it? No. He had somebody trying to defend it from the White House as if it wasn't fungent. Oh, that money was designated for humanitarian aid. that 5 billion, 6 billion that we paid for hostages. When you pay a radical Islamic terrorist $1 billion per hostage, they'll just grab more hostages. And now among those being held by Hamas are another 14 Americans. You want them back, it might cost you $1 billion apiece if they don't kill them. No, he doesn't freeze it. He doesn't even mention Iran. What he certainly didn't mention either was it was not just the 6 billion. On top of the 150 billion handed over by Barack Obama while Iran was engaged in killing Americans and Israelis by proxy, another total of about 50 billion was handed over by the Obama administration directly and indirectly to Iran to fund Hamas and Hezbollah and the development of nuclear weapons to wipe Israel off the map and to threaten other countries, including America. Paid for by the Democratic Party's Barack Obama and Joe Biden. 50 billion. How did this come? In addition to the 150 billion from Obama, you can add another 50 billion. A small amount of it came from the IMF without any American veto. Most of it came, though, by reversing the policies that had been in place by the previous Trump administration. Donald Trump enforced the embargoes against Iran. Enforced them. Iranian ships were not allowed to transport weapons or illegally trafficked oil. Even before the Ukraine war, the restrictions on American oil production that came from Joe Biden's administration drove the price of oil up significantly, putting money in the pockets of Vladimir Putin to attack to attack Ukraine, and of Iran to attack Israel. But oil exports of Iran, since Joe Biden came to power, have tripled. They have tripled, and they're getting paid more for it. Who did this? The United States government, Joebama. Former New York Mayor Rudolph Giuliani said he had been in Israel and met with Israeli officials during the Biden administration's years in power. And he said to them, you must be very concerned about Obama being on both sides. And they said, no, he's not on both sides. He's on Iran's side. We know he is. That man did everything he could to finance and empower Iranian nuclear development. You couldn't even make inspections of the sites without 30 days warning. It hardly even retarded their development of the nuclear program. He was just giving them money. Barack Hussein Obama, who made an apology tour of the Muslim world, apologizing for America. Don't forget, he reappointed Gates, the Republican Secretary of Defense of Bush, to continue the hunt for the mastermind of September 11th, Osama bin Laden. It was the Republicans in his administration that he kept there for that reason who got bin Laden. It was not his people. But that's another matter. 150 billion, followed by another 50 billion from Biden. How can this not be treason? They were killing Americans. Now, again, I do not plan to vote for Mr. Trump in the next election. I did vote for him in the previous two elections, but that is political. That's not my main purpose now. I'm stating facts based on Scripture and what's happened in light of Scripture. We have to remember that Isaiah, Nahum, Jeremiah, Daniel, they all addressed what was happening geopolitically and strategically in their day in light of scriptural prophecy. We must do the same, not politically editorializing, but looking at what is happening in world events in light of prophecy. The Prince of Persia, as we looked at on our previous webcast. 200 billion. Additionally, the United States had the power through the control of SWIFT and other mechanisms to close down Iran's capacity to make international bank transfers. They have not. Their ships are violating the embargoes with impunity, and they're being given billions and billions of dollars by Joebama. It becomes absurd. What Obama did, what Biden did as vice president, what John Kerry did, what Hillary Hinton did, what Austin is doing, what Blinken is doing, Susan Rice, Garland, and doing so with the blessings of all people, Jews in the American Congress and Senate, Chuck Schumer, Adam Schiff, Jerry Nadler, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, left-wing Jews who have no problem being in the same party with people who today, and yesterday were publicly siding with Hamas. Can you imagine? They found in one liberated village 40 babies and toddlers murdered by the Islamic terrorists. Infants were beheaded. The Muslims beheaded infants for the crime of being Jewish. Isn't that what Herod the Great did? Yet, Black Lives Matter, who don't care about black people, they say nothing about the black-on-black crime and the unspeakable murders taking place in Chicago with the blessings of pro-crime prosecutors and politicians, and even left-wing Jews like Spitzer in Illinois, whose family are radical homosexual activists, and Krasner in Philadelphia, all funded by another left-wing Jew, George Soros, and now his son. Jews are doing this. When I think of the 3.3 million black Christians murdered in Sudan over a period of 14 years by Muslim militias, black lives don't matter to Black Lives Matter. Yet, you have Omer, who married her brother, by common report, married her brother, a pervert. You have Tlaib, who has a Palestinian Hamas flag hanging out in her office on Capitol Hill. Supported by Alejandro Ortega-Cortez, Congresswoman Presley, another member of the squad, and perhaps above all, Lori Bush. Lori Bush was appointed to the House Judiciary Committee, formerly by Nancy Pelosi, despite the fact she's not a lawyer. She's not even a lawyer, but she's on the Judiciary Committee. And she said she's qualified to be in the committee because she's black. And she was part of the protests in Ferguson, Missouri, with Michael Brown. Now, as Eric Holder, himself black, a left-wing black, and a racist, I believe, caught up in the scandal of guns walking, fast and furious, and who was in contempt of Congress but was never brought to justice for it as the Attorney General. His Justice Department and the FBI under his direction or under his supervision investigated what happened in Ferguson. Michael Brown, a very big young guy, and an ex-convict who had spent 5 years in prison for a felony and who admitted on previous occasions, pled guilty to lying to the police, robbed a store owned by another minority, a little Asian guy who he assaulted and robbed. When a policeman recognized him, he assaulted the policeman and facially injured the policeman. The photos show that the cop was badly beaten up when he was attacked when he recognized Michael Brown. Michael Brown's fingerprints were found all over the cop's holster. He went for the cop's gun and the cop shot him. 5, possibly 6 witnesses, all of them black, were interviewed and re-interviewed extensively by the FBI. And it was found to be a justifiable shooting of a criminal. The ex-con who was with him said his back was turned, his hands were up, and he was saying, "Don't shoot." All the forensic science, the ballistics, and both autopsies proved scientifically that could not possibly have happened. And the witnesses would not confirm it happened. The whole thing was a lie. People rioted, began looting stores, using as an excuse to steal computers and televisions. And Lori Bush says her participation in this protest, hands up, don't shoot. The whole thing was orchestrated and promoted by Al Sharpton from New York, who pulled the same stunt in the Twiley Briley scandal in New York, accusing the police of something that never happened. A grandstander. Never happened. Black witnesses said it didn't happen. The forensic science proved it couldn't have happened. They had a film of the robbery. All they had was the word of an ex-con who previously pled guilty to lying to the police and who'd been in prison for 5 years. Yet, this Presley woman was elected to Congress, and she said she's qualified to be on the Judiciary Committee because she's a black woman who participated in those protests about Michael Brown. You couldn't make this stuff up. Now, these same women, known as the Squad, are siding with the Palestinian Hamas, Islamic terrorists, who beheaded little babies. They killed 40 babies in one room and beheaded the babies. Beheaded them. You will find in campuses throughout America, including Ivy League campuses, that Christian student organizations are being banned from campus for being pro-life and pro-heterosexual marriage. Because of their moral stance on abortion and on heterosexual marriage, Christian student organizations are being banned. Yet at Stanford, Harvard, Yale, and Columbia in New York, 41 student organizations are protesting in favor of Hamas, who have beheaded infants. These are very much the moral equivalent of those who supported and agreed with the Holocaust. They sing the praises of latter-day Eichmanns and Hitlers. Yet they claim to be liberals and believe in human rights. They say nothing about the realities of human rights. That Hamas came to power by pilfering international aid that was given to help the people. But they got the power by protesting that the Palestinian Authority, Arafat's people, did the same thing. They embezzled and stole the international aid. And so the people turned to Hamas. Hamas and the Palestinian Authority hate each other, as we already talked about. But they'll stick together against Israel and against Christians. Here we are. Who is funding them? Again, the previous administration of Mr. Trump stopped funding them. Mr. Biden took $230 million of your money, if you're an American taxpayer, and mine, and gave it to them. Imagine teaching little kids you have to murder Jews and to be a martyr in the jihad. And the American taxpayer is funding it. And then Biden, with his political motives, because there's an election next year, comes on and pretends to be pro-Israel. Doesn't mention Iran, doesn't freeze any assets, doesn't change policy. In addition, Iran is selling drones to Russia to kill Ukrainians, to Putin to kill Ukrainians. He had no problem putting an embargo on Russia, bank sanctions against Russia, freezing Russian assets. He'll do it with Russia. Why won't he do it with Iran? Because they're killing Jews. Two standards. And yet, Schumer, Wasserman, Schultz, Nadler, Schiff, these American Jewish politicians, and that other rather pathetic gentleman, known for his stolen glory, claiming to have been a combatant in Vietnam. They're all in the same party with the squad. No problem. MSNBC has three anti-Israel Islamic anchor persons as news presenters. 3 Muslims, all anti-Israel. I remember the anchor Joe Scarborough, not a Muslim, denouncing Trump for killing Soleimani, who's responsible for the death of dozens of Americans and hundreds of other people. And he protested Trump killing him. This kind of corruption in the media, corruption in the Democratic Party, and the corruption of left-wing American Jews pandering to anti-Semitism. You couldn't make it up. The world laughs at Biden. They know he's a stooge and a buffoon. They know he's a senile corruptocrat. Everybody knows that. Putin knows it. China knows it. They saw what he did in Afghanistan, and Putin knew he could make a move. Iran saw what he did in Afghanistan and knew they could make a move. And he's paying them billions of dollars. They will know it, but he's surrounded by incompetence, corrupt incompetence. He says the number one threat to American security is climate change, not the border. Meanwhile, they've only apprehended some of them. Thousands and thousands of people have entered the United States illegally across the southern border from countries like Iran, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, radical Muslims among them. Instead of protecting the border from them and the fentanyl traffickers and the human traffickers and the cartels, the FBI are putting Christian parents on terrorist watch lists for disapproving of the curriculum, indoctrinating their children into homosexual marriage acceptance and things of this nature contrary to their beliefs. Kamala Harris says the number one threat to America is white supremacist nationalism. You do get the occasional nut, the occasional psychopath, but nothing like this. Nothing like a September 11th. But forget about that. Let the radical Muslims enter the country along with the fentanyl dealers and the human traffickers. We'll use the FBI, says Garland, against Christians as a political Gestapo. The campus is claiming to be liberal or cheering people who behead babies and are blaming Israel. Israel did not occupy Gaza. They left it without any guarantees of a peace. They just left in goodwill. They were allowing people from Gaza to come into Israel to earn a living with work permits every day. They were allowing electricity. They were allowing food, water, utilities, fuel. There was no blockade. There was monitoring and control to stop weapons from getting into Israel from Gaza. But that's all. They were just protecting Israel from Hamas. But they didn't stop people who are Arabs in Gaza from coming to work in Israel and earning a living in Israel. They didn't shut off the water supply or the electricity or stop food supplies or medication. People who were seriously ill, children, elderly people who were seriously ill in Gaza, could be medevaced free of charge to Israeli hospitals for surgery by some of the top surgeons in the world to save their lives in Israeli hospitals. No occupation. It was run by Hamas, not by Israel. Yet these students take the side of Hamas. Murder civilians, abduct families, kill children in front of their parents, decapitate infants. And Yale and Harvard and Columbia, Stanford, they let them on the campus. They let those student organizations on the campus, but we have to keep the Christian organizations off the campus. Biden said not a word. Embargoes on Russia, but not on Iran. He didn't mention it. He froze assets of Russia and closed the international banking system to Russia, but not to Iran. Russia's killing Ukrainians. Iran is killing Jews and Christians and Americans. Again, you could not possibly make this up. Joebama. We're liberals. We believe in human rights. What do you need, Iran? 200 billion? No problem. We'll provide it for you. You call us the great Satan and you say you're going to kill us. The least you can do is let us pick up the bill for it. Don't worry. We're not going to put an embargo on you the way we did on Russia. We're going to let the price of oil go through the roof so you'll make more money, and we're not going to enforce any embargoes or exclude you from the banking system or stop you from transporting your wares by ships. We're not going to do what Donald Trump did. We're not going to kill your terrorist leaders like so many. We won't do that. Keep doing it. We'll keep paying for it. Don't worry about Israel. We'll give them a sponge and a mop and say, we're your friends. We're going to help you. We won't abandon you. Just leave the spigot open. Joe Biden, Joebama. These are the policies of Barack Obama continued. He's too senile and too stupid. He's surrounded by incompetent people. Not only does he not know what he's doing, he can't speak even intelligibly most of the time. But he's surrounded by people who are incompetent, ridiculously incompetent. Look at his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, a few weeks ago, saying, not in the last 20 years has the situation in the Middle East been so peaceable. Not in the last 20 years. I don't have to deal with these problems anymore. It's much better than it used to be. That's the national security advisor. Look what's happening now. Not only is the president a senile incompetent, he's surrounded by incompetence. People who are incompetent. All of our enemies and the enemies of Israel, the enemies of Western civilization, even the enemies of moderate Muslims know that Austin is a joke. They all know that Jake Sullivan is a clown. They see him as a clown because that's what he is. All of them know that Anthony Blinken is a lightweight among lightweights. They look upon Kamala Harris as a bimbo. That's how they see her, as a giggling bimbo. That's how our enemies look upon her. And then they see a corrupt, senile president, for want of a better term, an incipient dementia corruptocrat with a son who belongs under federal indictment and he should be indicted with him. And a media who will say nothing except lie. This is the reality. What's really tragic is the nonsense that you've heard today. People will say, oh, look, he sent an aircraft carrier, the Gerald Ford, and he sent a flotilla, a naval task force. Here, you want a mop? Oh, he's going to replenish the Iron Dome. Here, you want a sponge? Now, I'm not opposed to those things, obviously, but they're window dressing, they're cosmetic, they're ineffective unless you turn off the spigot. shut off the faucet and unplug the sink. But he didn't even mention Iran. He is a hypocrite, a liar, and a virtual traitor. Not just to our friends and allies, to our own country. He's letting these dangerous people cross the border. Instead, using the so-called deep state and the apparatus of national security against Christians. In a party with the squad. Adolf Eichmann fan clubs on universities. And the pathetic stupidity of American Jews, intelligent people who should know better, very intelligent people like Alan Dershowitz, who sees what the Democratic Party is and still votes Democrat. You can't save people from themselves. This is what is happening. This is exactly what is happening. We've talked before about Menelaus. Menelaus was the Jew who cooperated with Antiochus Epiphanes and the Seleucids in the saga of Hanukkah, the Jewish traitor. What Judas Iscariot is in the New Testament, Menelaus is in Judaism, the traitor within. The Benedict Arnold, the Guy Fawkes, the traitor within. That's what he is. Who's the traitor within? Those who are in the same party with the squad. Those who support Joebama. His name's not Chuck Schumer, it's Menelaus. His name is not Adam Schiff, it's Menelaus. His name is not Jerry Nadler, it's Menelaus. His name or her name is not Debbie Wasserman Schultz, it's Menelaus. His name is not Senator Blumenthal, it's Menelaus. His name is not Spritzer, it's Menelaus. His name is not Paul Krasner, it's Menelaus. His name is not Jerry Cohen, it's Menelaus. Steve Cohen, it is Menelaus. Menelaus, Menelaus. Guy Fawkes, Judas Iscariot, Benedict Arnold, Menelaus, Chuck Schumer. That's what you've got. Merrick Garland, Menelaus, Anthony Blinken, Menelaus. Much the same as Black Lives Matter do not care about the lives of blacks. Just ask Patrice Cullors with 4 houses, a multimillionaire is living in Topanga Canyon. Where's the missing 90 million? Asked Black Lives Matter. Look at her lifestyle. They're just her stooges. Blacks like her are exactly what Booker T. Washington warned would come. Those who would profiteer from the plight of the black man. They'd be in the grievance industry. They need to keep the black man down to line their pockets. That's their racket. Sharpton, Jesse Jackson. They make their living on the race industry. They have to keep it going. That's Black Lives Matter. And that's liberal Jewish Democrats. Black Lives Matter don't. I care about blacks. They don't. I care about Jews. My family are Jewish. I care about Jews, but they don't. It's not about that. Menelaus never cares about Jews. God does. This is unspeakable. You really can't even begin to make this kind of thing up. They claim to be liberal. How much? 200 million? Another 6 billion? Another 30 billion? How much you need to kill us, Iran? How much you need to fund Hezbollah and Hamas and murder Jews, Iran? How much you need? Don't worry, we'll give it to you. We're liberals. Oh, I know that you have killed women for not wearing a halabja in Iran. The women who've been flogged and even killed in Iran by your Sharia, your Islamic Shia Sharia. Women have been killed, but that's okay. We believe in women's rights, so we're going to write you a check even though you murder women. We don't really care about women. We just use them as political stooges. We just say we care about women in order to manipulate stupid women to vote for us. How much you need? Oh, we know you hang homosexuals in Tehran and Tabriz, Isfahan. They literally have not scalpels. They have construction cranes with homosexuals hanging dead from them. So Joebama says, how much you need, Iran? You want to hang homosexuals? Oh, we're in favor of LGBTQ. We're in favor of homosexual rights. Not really. You can hang them. We just say that. We just use them as stooges to manipulate stupid people to vote for us. How much you need? 200 million? That's Joebama. That's the Democratic Party. That's Barack Obama. That's Michelle Obama. That's Joe and Jill Biden. That is Bill and Hillary Clinton. That is Jake Sullivan. That is John Kerry. That is Austin, Blinken, Susan Rice, and Merrick Garland. All with the blessings of Menlaus Schumer, Menlaus Schiff, Menlaus Nadler, Menlaus Wasserman Schultz, and Menlaus Blumenthal, Menlaus Cohen, and others. In bed with the squad now, who are cheering on Hamas while they behead Jewish babies. Well, they're not all bad. They might not have unplugged the clogged sink. They might not have turned off the spigot. They might have let the faucet continue running and flooding the kitchen and permanently damaging the electrical system in the house and the floorboards and ruining the carpets. Water damage. But they gave us a sponge. Yeah, they gave you a sponge. That's all they gave you. I like to say to people who should know better, who do know better, like Alan Dershowitz, did you thank Joebama for the sponge? What are you doing with those people? Oh, you that much of a schlamassel? You're an intelligent man. I heard you speak in London. I know people who were your students at Harvard Law who are friends of mine. They said you were a very intelligent person. How can you do this? A man of your intelligence, a professor emeritus from Harvard. You see what they're doing in Harvard? And you still vote for that party? What is wrong with you? What is wrong with any of you American Jews who vote for that party? You're doing the same thing. You're being stooges, patsies, suckers, the same as Black Americans are being played for stooges, patsies, and suckers by people who really hate them. The party of Jim Crow, slavery, and segregation. But what I'm concerned about is the church. You will allow people who, an Eichmann fan club, to be a recognized campus organization at a prestigious university, but kick the Christians off the campus. Oh, my Lord. And the media presents it in such a way. Oh, you see, he's a friend of Israel. Quick, shut off the spigot. No. You don't need to shut the spigot off. Here, let me give you a sponge. That's what you heard today. Yesterday, a brave young Jewish believer who just turned 20, the Maglani Brigade, was killed defending Israel. There are others. I can't be specific. We'll have some photos. We can't give names for security reasons. But Israel is highly reliant in a war environment. It's not a big or rich country. To fight without everyone participating in it. It's a national struggle to survive. The squad complains about the $3 or $4 billion a year Israel gets in military aid from the United States. Well, you know what? What they're not telling you is that those are credits that go to American companies like Boeing and Raytheon, whose stock went up today, defense contractors. And that American defense contractors and the Pentagon use Israel as a test laboratory to develop and improve American defense technology. I remember during the Cold War when I lived in Israel, when the Soviets were obviously supporting and to a degree animating the Syrian Air Force. And every time American F-15s or F-16s had a dogfight with MiG fighters over Lebanon or Syria, U.S. Air Force and McDonnell Douglas had briefings. They didn't put it in the public, but there were briefings at a place called Herzliya near Tel Aviv. They debriefed the Israeli pilots to improve the combat performance and design of American aircraft against the MiGs. They don't tell you the United States benefits technologically from that kind of cooperation. And they're getting it at a relatively cheap price because you have somebody else actually testing your hardware in combat at the risk of their lives instead of American lives. They don't tell you that. How dare you give $3 or $4 billion in defense aid to Israel? We should be giving $150 billion to Iran, the way Barack Obama did. Or another $50 billion, the way Joe Biden did. This is not fair. Giving a country smaller than New Jersey $3 or $4 billion a year, even though we benefit from it technologically, when they're surrounded by countries bigger than themselves trying to destroy them and who hate us, who murder women, who hang people who are homosexuals. Not that I agree with homosexuality, but don't tell me what a liberal you are if you vote for Obama and Biden, who fund people who hang homosexuals and who flog and kill women. Decapitate them, to say nothing of what they do to Christians. And then they tell people they're liberal. Pro-murder fan clubs of Ivy League students saying that they're liberal. In my own youth, I was a radical socialist. I came to realize a book I'd read at the age of 13 or 14, Animal Farm, was right. I came to understand there was a problem about socialism. It didn't work. And for all of its flaws and faults, market economies gave the average person a higher standard of living and a higher standard of personal freedom in the long term. And I'm not saying that I agree with robber baron capitalism by any means. There are abuses in every economic system. But socialism is a failure. It's never worked anywhere. I gave it up. Now, if you disagree, that's fine. But don't tell me you're a liberal when you're supporting fascism. Islamo-fascism. There was some moron with a homosexual flag waving it among the Palestinian flags. You know what they would do to you? Do you know what Hamas would have done to him? Or the Iranians? They would have hung him. But he's stupid waving them. Again, it is difficult to fathom how anybody can be so stupid. You cannot concoct such an idiot deliberately. They are spiritually deluded. They're spiritually blinded. Blacks who support the party of Jim Crow and apartheid and slavery, they're spiritually, it's not just intellectually deluded, they're spiritually blind. I believe that. And I'm not saying that for political reasons, I'm saying it for theological reasons. Most abortions, 7 out of 10 abortion clinics in and around black communities, they're killing your own babies. And you vote for them. And then they tell you that's civil rights. Gun control was invented by the Ku Klux Klan in the American South. The Democrats invented it to stop black people from defending themselves from the Klan. You think that the gangs in the south side of Chicago or North Philadelphia or Watts or Harlem or Bedford-Stuyvesant are going to get rid of their guns because they become illegal? Taking away the right of decent people, including decent black people, to defend themselves, and then defund the police to make sure they get murdered. So you can't protect yourself and the cops can't protect you. They've been defunded. That's the squad. That's what Presley believes. That is what Lori Booker believes. That is what Alejandro Ortega-Cortez believes. If Black lives don't matter, the Black lives matter, and Jewish lives don't matter to the Jews in the Democratic Party who got people like Obama elected. Jewish lives don't matter to Spritzer or Axelrod or Rahm Emanuel, and especially not to Chuck Schumer. This is terrible. How can intelligent people be so stupid? So self-destructively stupid? Well, we know how. They are spiritually blind. Once you are blind spiritually, you will become stupid intellectually. Secular Jews have turned their back on the God of their fathers, on the Torah. Religious Jews not only reject their own Messiah, but they hate the Jews who believe in him, like that Israeli soldier who was killed yesterday defending Israel while the yeshiva boys refused to serve in the military. Again, you couldn't invent this. It's too absurd. It's Alice in Wonderland. It's ludicrous. It's a Fellini movie. It's just absolutely devoid of any rational frame of reference for the way these people think and behave. To say you're liberal? Yeah, you're a feminist. You vote Democrat. Look what they do to feminists in Iran. Oh, you're pro-gay. Yeah? Go see what they do to people like you in Iran. And who's picking up the bill for it? You are. You're paying for it. You vote for it. Fortunately, we can see things as saved Christians from a biblical perspective. Even now, there are countries in Europe that have stopped funding to the Palestinian Authority who are supporting Hamas and who are sponsoring an educational system that indoctrinates children to be terrorists. Germany, I guess out of guilt, and Austria stopped aid. Britain. But Holy Catholic Ireland, of course, is not going to stop it. And either is that other Irishman, Joe Biden. By the way, my mother's family is Irish. And as somebody who is half Irish, I am ashamed. As somebody with a Jewish family, I am ashamed. They're blind. Spain, the same. They're going to continue to support this, and Biden is going to continue to write checks to murder Jews. But don't worry, I'll give you a sponge. Please turn off the faucet. Don't worry, I'll get a mop. Unplug the sink. Don't worry, I'll have an aircraft carrier off the coast. Not going to do anything, but maybe scare somebody. But don't expect me to unplug the sink or turn off the faucet. He didn't mention Iran, but Daniel chapter 10 does. Some of you know our regular supporters. We have the Jerusalem Evangelism Fund, and we recently acquired a bomb-proof bus, a bulletproof bus to transport children to a Messianic school. It had to be built to specifications because of the danger of bombings and shootings by terrorists, Islamic terrorists. Well, the school is closed, and the headmaster of the school, the principal, is mobilized in reserve duty in a frontline combat brigade. We have his picture. We can't tell you his name or show his face. Show you the picture. The bus that we acquired is being used to transport goods to believing soldiers. Reserves have been mobilized. These people will not get their secular salaries. They'll get a stipend of sorts from the military, but that's not very much. These people have families. Israel's a very expensive country. And we are doing all we can to help. Prayer is first and foremost. Pray for the protection of these believing Jewish soldiers. Most of them are only in their late teens, early 20s. Some are older, but they have families. Lost one yesterday, but I know others in combat brigades, as my son once was. And as you know, if you're one of our regular people, it's our policy. We never ask for money. We only ask the Lord. There's only been a couple of times we asked people to contribute, but never to Moriel. The first time was when we had the Chernobyl children over to England. Their skin was white as snow. due to the destruction of erythrocytes, red cells from the radiation in Chernobyl. We had them for England. We are helping sponsor them financially. We asked people to give money. Every penny went to the kids getting the medical treatment. His skin was this white. We did something for New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina, and we did a major drive to help believers and Missionary Aviation Fellowship after the Haiti earthquake. It's only been 3 times we've really done this. It has to be something really, really major for us to ask people to contribute. And we assure you all the money goes not to Moriel, not to our own work. We've always made sure it goes to those who need it other than our own work. We never use it for our own budget. We don't do that. We were able to get bore well water drilled in Haiti after the earthquake. We were able to fund Missionary Aviation Fellowship. They had these planes that could land on dirt tracks, very good Christian pilots. We had the Chernobyl kids. That was the first time. We only do it at special times. But we want to help these soldiers and their families at this time financially. Israel struggles financially at the best of times. But now it's a war. It's bad. Everybody has to chip in. And we can say it's part of our testimony to do that to Jewish people. And that is true. But we want to stand by the believers in Israel, whose sons, whose brothers, and whose fathers are in the military, most of them in combat brigades. They need our support, but they desperately covet our prayers. Prayer is the most important. We're not asking you to do anything but seek the Lord. If the Lord leads you, you can contribute to Moriel's work in Israel on the Moriel website, moriel.org, and in the comments, just put Messianic Soldiers Fund or just Soldiers Fund. It'll all go to an organization that we support that ministers to believing soldiers. Good Nativa, but that's neither here nor there. We'll get the money to where it belongs and to whom it belongs and who needs it for the work of the Lord among the soldiers. And these soldiers witness, they share their faith to other soldiers discreetly in a way that they're not going to get themselves in trouble for doing it, hopefully, but they do it. And in a war, people are afraid. A war is a time where people think about God. They think about their own mortality. They see people being killed. When you're a young soldier and you walk into a room and you see 40 murdered Jewish children and little infants with their heads chopped off, sawed off, it does something to you when you're a young guy, especially. And then they see the yeshiva boys in B'nai Brak and Mea Shearim hiding under the table. Although there are more moderate religious Jews that do serve in the army, the ones who hate believers the most, the ultra-Orthodox, don't. It's an opportunity for the gospel. I want to say also that I feel nothing but compassion for the Arab children who have no choice. They were born under the regime of Hamas, who use them as human shields, shooting at Jewish civilians and using their own children as human shields because they just don't care. They think they're shahadi, they're going to heaven because they died as martyrs in the jihad. And you hear them yelling, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Make no mistake, this is being done in the name of Islam. Just listen to what they say. Allahu Akbar. Just listen to the news. You'll always hear, Allahu Akbar, dragging a dead Jew through the street. Allahu Akbar, murdering a child. Allahu Akbar. That's their religion. They say. That's what they do. This is all we're up against. demonic powers. A demonic trio. That demonic trio is composed of Iran, Hamas and Hezbollah, and Joebama, the Obama-Biden administration. It is a trio of Satan. Israel doesn't need a sponge. It needs somebody to shut off the spigot. The trio of Satan and the judgment of God. Eloheinu Moshienu, tishpoch mishpat shelcha neged oyavenu b'shem Yeshua HaMashiach. Our God and Savior, we know that you will pour out your judgment on our enemies and the enemies of Israel, whether they be in Gaza, whether they be in Iran, or whether they be in the White House. My prayer is that God's judgment would not come upon America and Europe because of the sins of their wicked governments, who so many people, including people who should know better, stupidly and even self-destructively voted for. I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curse thee. Thank you so much for listening. Again, please pray for the believers in the Israeli military. And if the Lord leads you to support the ministry that we support, that ministers to them and helps them practically and financially and so on, please do as the Lord leads you in the comments on the donation page. But we only want you to do what God tells you to do. We're not asking you for money, but we are begging you for prayer. Thank you so very much, and God bless.